Good, thank you very much. Hello, lovely to see you all. The title, How to Change Your Mind, Meditative States and Indirect Methods. I was given that title and I didn't change indirect methods because I quite like the mystery of it, but it doesn't really help you understanding what's coming. So I thought I'd explain a bit about that first. So the indirect methods that I'll be weaving into the talk are ethics, ritual, devotion, the arts, and service. So those are the sort of things that run in parallel. And so the talk sort of plays with, looks at meditative states, but also hangs on them these other things that we can be doing in our lives that point to the same sort of things, support the same sort of things. So if you were sitting there thinking there was more mystery to indirect methods than that, then I'm sorry to shatter that, but that's sort of what we're doing. And the talk is, so through this year, on these talks each month, we're sort of following the framework of a set of talks that Bhante Sangharakshita, the founder of the Triratna Buddhist movement, did back in the mid-70s. They were the Brighton lectures. There were 4 lectures in Brighton. They've been pulled together in a short book called Buddhism for Today and Tomorrow. And it's based around, he wrote a poem called The Four Gifts, which I will read in a bit, and sort of was trying to describe in these 4 lectures what Triratna is offering the world. So a creative, practical presentation of the Buddhist teachings rooted in tradition, but expressed in modern life. So as you'll know, coming to Triratna, we sort of anchor our practice in the Buddhist traditions, but we try and reflect on that in the modern life that we live in. And some of the examples I've got, I'm a bit nervous about one of them, but some of the examples I've got are very modern life, sort of picking into modern life. So anyway, let me start by reading the poem, The Four Gifts, which introduces the 4 symbolic gifts. I come to you with 4 gifts. The first gift is a lotus flower. Do you understand? My second gift is a golden net. Can you recognize it? My third gift is a shepherd's round dance. Do your feet know how to dance? My fourth gift is a garden planted in a wilderness. Could you work there? I come to you with 4 gifts. Dare you accept them? So if you're anything like me, that's one of those poems that is a bit too mysterious for me. I don't quite understand it, so the talks will be very useful unpacking it. But what it's pointing to is 4 dimensions of the spiritual life. So the lotus flower, a method of personal development, that golden net, a vision for human existence, the shepherd's round dance, the nucleus of a new society, and the garden planted in a wilderness, a blueprint for the new world. So the one we're focusing on today is a method of personal development, the lotus flower. And you'll have seen from Ratnaprabha's first lecture, which was done a month ago, that he spent a lot of time on the lotus flower. And I want to, and actually the next one, so the one after me, we'll be looking at comparing the meditations, the different types of meditations, choose how you choose your meditation and all of that. So this, I'm sort of playing in the middle of that, but I want to go back on the lotus flower. I've always been very struck by the image of the lotus flower, and Ratnaprabha described it as this flower, lotus emerging and growing from the mud, and it's a metaphor for the stages of internal development. So it's the nurturing of the seed and potential that we have in ourselves. So we need a soil of favourable circumstances, the warmth of spiritual friendship, the light of intellectual clarity, and the rain of the Dharma. So just in this image of this lotus flower rising up from the mud, we're looking at and seeing these things. And one of the questions he asked in his talk, I wasn't at the talk, I watched it on YouTube afterwards, was, is there a flower in our culture that's like the lotus? And he suggested the rose, and somebody else came up with the lily, but I was shouting at my screen, I almost was shouting at my screen, the daffodil. And it's because at this time of year, I love coming to the daffodil. So we're going to spend a little bit of time with a daffodil, just to take us here. But before we do that, he did a lovely little haiku by Koshahi Asa, which I'm going to read out again, because it really, why do these symbols matter? Why do I get inspired by seeing the daffodil? Well, I'll read this haiku. In a world of grief and pain, flowers bloom even then. And it's sort of a reminder for me. I love this time of year at spring when you start seeing daffodils coming up through that winter soil, it almost feels, and then coming with this lovely screaming trumpet of a flower. And also when you buy them in the shops, I'm fascinated by the fact that you just go and pick this bunch. They're still £1, I think they've just reduced the number in them, but a pound of daffodils that look dead, and then you take them home and you put them in water, and then they just come to life. There's something incredibly magical about that. So if we were to spend time just allowing ourselves to see that, I find it incredibly inspirational. I'm going to now, I think it was last week's, not this week's meditation class. So this time of year, if I'm doing meditation class, I always like to read Wordsworth, Wander Lonely as a Cloud, which is about daffodils. But I'm going to read it now because I really want to just let us absorb that imagery of the daffodil. So here we are. This is William Wordsworth, I Wander Lonely as a Cloud. I wander lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. Beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not be but gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills, and dances with the daffodils. So for me, that's a very good example of what we're talking about, those sort of indirect methods for trying to point us to something or letting us feel something as well. It's the sense of feeling I get when I see those daffodils that really inspires me. Sort of all goes downhill for the rest of the year now, but actually this time of year I grab onto it. So what is personal development? So and some of this is taken from Bhante's Satyagosha's first lecture. So it's the development of personal, it's the unfolding of our potential, biological, physiological and spiritual. So Satyagosha contrasts two types of evolution. The first evolution, the lower evolution, which is the biological process that has brought us here now as self-conscious human beings. But we have the key thing is the self-conscious human being. We've been given this self-consciousness, this ability to think. And the higher evolution is the deliberate psychological and spiritual growth leading towards enlightenment. So it's up to us to decide what we want to do with this consciousness, how we want to develop it, how we want to grow it. Nobody's going to be able to do that for us. There's no guru, God, political leader that can do that work for us. It's our responsibility. We're the ones that have to sit there with this thing that we've been given, this body and this mind that we've been given, and we can decide whether to move to the next level, to take ourselves to the next level. And as living beings, Sangharakshita would challenge, we want to grow. So, and I think this is some of the tension in us. This is why there's a, probably why you're sitting here. There's something you've got that I do want to be doing something. I do want to be growing. I do wanting to be getting better. That probably sits within us. And Buddhism provides a clear path in how to do that. That's one of the things Buddhist does. So why do we need a method? Because we often get stuck. We often feel dissatisfied with ourselves. We don't know how to change. We lack the tools of inner transformation. So Buddhism offers a method, practical steps for reshaping our consciousness. And meditation is the primary method. So the reason why meditation is the primary method is because it works directly on our consciousness. So it shows us both the higher state of consciousness, so it gives us a glimmer into what that is, but it also gives us methods to lead to that state. Bhante's in his lecture, he's very clear that meditation, so if you're thinking, well, why do we do the two meditation practices we teach here, why is it so core? Well, actually, Sangharakshita's purporting and saying, actually it's the key, because it works directly on our consciousness. I would also say the indirect methods for me are also very important, because without them, definitely in my practice, I feel meditation wouldn't sit on its own strong enough. Probably a reflection of our lives in the Western world, actually. It may be different if I was a monk up a mountain somewhere where I spent all of my day meditating or sitting in quiet contemplation. That isn't my life. I live just along the Holloway Road. And therefore my life's slightly different. So I probably need other tools and other indirect methods to help support the growth that comes from meditation practice. So I'm going to frame it around the four dhyanas, the higher states of consciousness, because this is what Bhante talks about in his lecture, or Sangharakshita talks about in his lecture. And he describes them in the traditional qualities of them, the metaphors in them, and the plain English psychological states. And the first dhyana is integration. It's the initial thought and sustained mental activity, concentration, joy. The metaphor is like soap powder fully saturated with water, so everything in our lives is all washing together and sort of merging in together. And it's bringing scattered energies of the mind into harmony. So the indirect method I've thought of, these aren't direct maps, so I am not trying to sell to you that I have picked an indirect method that directly relates to these dhyanic stages, but actually I think there is a link, and there is a link for me. And the first one, this is the one I'm slightly embarrassed about, and it came because when I went on the YouTube channel to watch Ratnaprabha's first talk, I don't use YouTube a lot, but one of the videos that came up was The Lion King, A Circle of Life. So I am offering you that, and the reason I'm offering you that, so the video I watched of the Lion King Circle of Life is the London Gay Men's Chorus did it about 3 or 4 years ago, I think, actually it would have been before COVID, so probably slightly longer than that, for a Pride event, in front of with the cast from Lion King, in front of, I think it was the Colosseum or the Palladium, so out on the street, and singing with the cast. And I have got the words, and actually I was thinking, have I got time to do the words? But I'm going to do the words, because the words in themselves are worth listening to too. From the day we arrive on the planet, and blinking step into the sun, there is more to see that can ever be seen, more to do that can ever be done. There's far too much to take in here, more to find than can ever be found, but the sun rolling high through the sapphire sky keeps great and small on the endless round. It's the circle of life, and it moves us all through despair and hope, through faith and love, till we find our place on the path unwinding in the circle of life. Now, I think those words are lovely. And actually, the reason I wanted to use the example is that when we talk about the arts, for me, it doesn't have to be the high arts. It has to be the arts that speak to us. And this video, seeing these I grew up in an area where as a gay man you were oppressed, but seeing these men just singing out in the opening with this pride, with this wonderful calling music of the Lion King, actually just every time I watch that video I feel joy. So there is a real sense of joy that arises in me, probably similar to that joy that arises in that first dhyanic state. That real, so look for the clues in your life, look for the bits of art that give you that feeling. It doesn't really matter where it comes from, but there is a real purity in that. So anyway, I've got that out of the way. The others are slightly more mundane and more real, but that's, for me, that's a very important example of an example of the arts playing in and giving you an idea. The second dhyana is inspiration. So this is when in a meditative state you have no discursive thought, you have deep joy. It's like a lake fed by an underground spring. It's a deeper energy begins to flow in, receiving uplifting energies from deeper or higher levels of consciousness. So you'll all know, if you're a bit like me with your distractions in mindfulness of breathing, as we do that more and more, the distractions can get less. This is the no discursive thought, it's that stilling. But actually it's that sense of we're being fed by something. And for me, I've picked two things to describe in those, what are we calling them? I keep on forgetting, the indirect methods. Devotion, and I'll talk a bit about my painting practice. So I think I don't think particularly in the West, I'm definitely not very good at devotion. When I travel to India, I meet people in the movement in India, devotion is a much more easy cultural thing. For us, I have a resistance to it. But when I practice devotion, there is a real opening up to something. And I wonder whether this is an example of the underground spring, something deeper, feeling it in. So when I look at the figure, Green Tara is one of the bodhisattvas that I love, and I'm very inspired by, devoting to her, where she's got fearlessness and compassion. She's stepping into the world. She's got this youthful, unlimited compassion for the world. Those things are incredibly inspiring. And actually, if you show a devotion to those figures, they sort of allow something to seep in. And I found that easier to do. I used to paint at school and then didn't paint for a bit. And when I retired about 15 years ago now. And I started painting again. And the joy of painting for me is I started doing traditional painting, I'm doing abstract now. But when you're painting and you're really trying to see what's there, you're having to really look. And we don't often really look. Your mind has to be still. I can't do painting if I come with an active mind. I have to sit there and see what's there. And definitely now I'm trying to learn how to do abstract painting. And abstract painting, I always thought I have no idea what that is. But actually, when you're doing abstract painting, you're looking for something that you're not even sure what you're looking for. But you are searching for something. You're opening your mind. You're observing something. You're waiting for something to come in. So those sort of activities are very useful to sort of open you up to this sort of stage, this inspiration stage. It makes you open to those points of inspiration. The third dhyana stage is permeation. So deep happiness, steadiness, like lotuses bathed in water. Higher consciousness fills and transforms or saturates the whole being. And the examples that I've picked for this are chanting and choir. So I sing in a choir. I've pretty much always sung in a choir. When I say always, I probably was sort of 7 or 8 when I first started in a church choir. And I still sing in a choir now. And there is something very beautiful about singing in a choir. Some of you sing in choirs, I know, some of you may not. But when you're singing in a choir, you're singing with other people. You're creating something beautiful with other people. You don't do it on your own, you're doing it with others. You're Also, if you there's something very technical in music, but it's actually very beautiful, that actually if you're in pitch and you're singing together, there are vibrations that actually happen that you don't get other than that creates beauty. So you can create, and I sing in choirs that we're a non-religious choir, but we will sing Christian music sometimes, and also in churches with wonderful acoustics. And it doesn't matter they're in churches, it doesn't matter it's Christian music, but actually in those environments where there's just beauty created in that music, and you're absorbed by it. It's an incredibly absorbing thing, with the sound of singing with people, vibrating with people. And we do that here too. So this isn't an ad for the mantra chanting class, third Saturday of the month, after this class. It's not for that, although you would all be welcome. But actually we do that in our tradition too. So mantra chanting is where we come together, and that sense of chanting a mantra together, where we're vibrating together, we're in a room together, we're practicing together. Often we're doing mantras of Buddhas or Bodhisattvas, so if we know the Buddha or Bodhisattva we're evoking them, we're drawing in their qualities and skills, but we're collectively doing that, and there's that absorption, there's that bathing in water, the lotus is bathed in waters, there's that real sense of community and bathing. So those are the two sort of indirect methods that I sort of support. Gives me a clue of what that might look like, what that permeation might look like. And then the fourth dhyana stage is radiation. So equanimity, purity of awareness. The metaphor is like a man emerging from a cool bath that then it doesn't say here, but then puts a warm towel on him. Some of these metaphors I get lost in, but I'll give you the metaphor. But I think it's that sense of, well, I don't know quite how the metaphor works for me, but it's awareness becomes luminous, outward flowing. That transformed consciousness begins to shine outward and affect the world. So it's a bigger sense. It's beyond ourselves. Radiation. The clue is in that. And I've got two things I want to talk about this: volunteering, or as Bhante called it in the thing, service, in the indirect method, service. So volunteering, and also Kshitigarbha. So I've always been. I don't know whether any of you know the Bodhisattva Kshitigarbha, but Kshitigarbha is this young monk. Very innocent-looking male monk, very simply dressed, in a sort of robe, carries a staff, just has a look of innocence and beauty about him. And Kshitigarbha works, it sort of spreads the Dharma in the worst places, in the hellish of places that you could find. And a lot of the Tibetan scripture around this, when they talk about Kshitigarbha, I read it once and then I didn't bother to read it again because it was so horrific, but it just goes on and on and on, describing the hellish world that this Bodhisattva works in. And yet Kshitigarbha is this young, fresh-faced monk. And what this points to me, and I find this incredibly inspiring, is that if we get into this sort of state, we can carry this sense of whatever we're carrying. I'll come on to talk about compassion, but this compassion and love, radiating it without being into this world that needs it, but not being affected by the world. So I find that a really inspirational test on me about, how can we get to the state where we just can radiate into a world which can be quite terrible and can genuinely be a terrible and hard world, and yet we're just radiating into it. And volunteering is another way we can sort of try that practicalities. I definitely sort of once in my life, when I was really become internally focused and was leading quite a chaotic life, I hadn't volunteered for about 10 years. I'd had a history of volunteering before, and I started to volunteer again, working with people who were sectioned under the Mental Health Act. And it was a wonderful way of getting me out of myself and giving something else. So I bring volunteering, it's quite a crude reflection on it, but it's another practice, it's another indirect method that sort of sets the circumstances for these, to frame these meditative states. So those are the 4 dhyanas. Bhante then goes on to talk about that positive emotion is the foundation of spiritual life, and he insists without positive emotion there is no spiritual life, and says many people's first duty is simply to be happy. I quite like that as many people's first duty is simply to be happy. So positive emotion provides the energy and flexibility necessary for transformation. Without it, meditation becomes dry and insight becomes disconnected from life. So that is, think about that in our practice as well, that actually it's fine to be working to be happy. We need to think what happy means. But actually that sense of that's one of our primary duties is to get, and of course we've got the metta bhavana to help us with that, the developing of loving kindness. And then he goes on to talk about that. So the practice fostering friendliness, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity and devotion. And these together, Satyagosha calls the liberation of the heart. I want to talk a bit about ethics now. So I'm, the threefold path, which is ethics, meditation and wisdom, is the threefold path to enlightenment. So ethics plays an important part and is listed, Satyagosha lists it as one of those, I have to keep on referring to what they are, the indirect methods. And just in case some of you in the room don't know what are, we have 5 sort of ethical precepts that we try and work towards. I'm just going to run through them because it's worth dwelling. I'll probably dwell on 1 or 2, but abstention from killing living beings, abstention from taking the not given, abstention from sexual misconduct, abstention from false speech, and abstention from taking intoxicants. And the positives, which I think are more interesting because they point to maybe where the meditative states could be taking it. With deeds of loving kindness, I purify my body. With open-handed generosity, I purify my body. With stillness, simplicity and contentment, I purify my body. With truthful communication, I purify my speech. With mindfulness clear and radiant, I purify my mind. And the one in there that's always fascinated me, and is sort of, again, one of those indirect methods that's really been an inspiration for me. And again, I have to talk a bit about what's for me, because these are individual journeys, so you have to find your own journey. So I'm not saying this will be important for you, it may or may not be, but the one that I was very struck by, with stillness, simplicity and contentment, I purify my body. So that happens to be the one that's abstention from sexual misconduct, and you could go, well, that's I think I do that, but actually this is clearly pointing to something else. And imagine what your mental state would be like. Imagine what my mental state would be like with stillness, simplicity and contentment. I'm not sure I'm often living in a state of stillness, simplicity and contentment. Therefore, what is it in our ethical practice? What is it in what we're doing that is affecting our mind? Because that's the mind we bring to our meditations. That's the mind we're working on in our meditations. And if we can do more in our ethical life to mean that we've got better conditions for our meditation, it means the meditations go deeper, and then we are able to see more directly, and I'll come on to that wisdom bit now. So that's why, think about your ethical practice as one of the indirect methods too. So I'm coming towards the end now, which will give us a bit of time for questions. But I just want to dwell on, there are 2 kinds of meditation. So samatha, the development of calm, so that's cultivating concentration, joy, tranquility. It's powerful, but it doesn't last. and there's the vipassana, the development of insight, or you could say in that threefold path, the wisdom bit. And the vipassana is seeing directly into reality. It's sort of seeing impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, insubstantiality. So for those of you who've been sort of reading a bit about Buddhism, these are one of the key teachings. We really have to understand that things are impermanent, that actually there is unsatisfactoriness and insubstantiality. And when those two unite, and they must unite, the purified heart must unite with the illumined mind. That's sort of what we're trying to work towards. We're trying to do those two things. So we're trying to still the mind, purify the mind, so that we can see reality. When we see reality, we truly see the depth of reality. Our mind truly evolves and ultimately become enlightened. So when calm and insight are fully matured, two liberations arise: the liberation of the heart, which is the emotional transformation, and the liberation by wisdom, which is the penetrating insight. And this is the culmination of personal development. Now, some of us in our lifetime, I shouldn't say it includes me, because we can all attain enlightenment and work towards it. It sometimes feels quite difficult, but actually this is what we're trying to, in the Buddhist path, this is what we're trying to move towards. And changing our mind in Buddhism is far more than changing opinions. It means transforming consciousness, unfolding our potential, entering deeper levels of joy and clarity, radiating that transformation outwards into the world. And it all begins with the recognition that it's you that can change, and Buddhism shows you how.